All right, good morning, everyone. I hope you are feeling energized and ready for the last day here at Education 2.0 Conference USA 2024. I hope you had an amazing break and are eager to jump into the excitement of today. It's the climax of an incredible journey packed with fresh discoveries, meaningful connections, and unforgettable moments. Let's make today absolutely unforgettable. Before we jump into today's exciting lineup, I want to take a moment to express our gratitude to someone who's been instrumental in making this event possible. Let's give a big round of applause to our gold sponsor, John K. Shakarami, the founder and CEO of Ophelio. Sean, thank you for your fantastic support and dedication in advancing education. All right, without further delay, let's dive into the first session of the day. Get ready for an eye opening panel on upskilling and reskilling for career transitions, meeting the demands of evolving industries, where the experts will dive deep into the strategies for staying ahead in today's fast paced job market. Join me as I invite Laura Sultan, the founder and CEO of Designs by Nature Gems, as our moderator, and our panelists will be introduced shortly as well. Welcome them to the stage.
Okay. Thank you for that introduction. I am here to share our experiences. All of us have dealt within different industries to some degree, trying to share skills, grow our personal and professional resources, and share that information to others.
Thank you to Education 2.0 for having us here. We're very pleased to be here. A little bit about me. I'm going to call this the career pivot talk. I was a fashion industry executive in the last century. And after that, I moved into fashion education and taught for 20 years at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. As anyone who's taught, which I am assuming several of you are former educators here in the room, raise your hand if you are or currently an educator. Yes, that's why we're here at the education conference. It is not the most well-paying, often very rewarding, but not the most well-paying field. And, I had the daunting prospect of sending my kids through college, two at once, 1 year apart. So that said, I decided that I would investigate e-learning, and I started at my college developing e-learning courses. And e-learning courses at the college were run by a small department of several gaming guys who I quickly became friends with. And eventually I was doing my own development. And I thought to myself, this is something I can do professionally. So I took the director out for breakfast one day and I said, what's your graduate degree in? What do you do? What is this called? What is this field? And he said, it's instructional design. And my degree is a master's of science in instructional design. And he laid out the path for me. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So I enrolled myself at age 53 into an instructional design master's program and started my career pivot. And this would be my third career. And before I finished my degree, I was already freelancing, not in education, but in corporate design for an e-learning agency. And by the time I graduated and wrote my thesis, I had paid off my education. So it was really a great investment for me. After I worked for a couple of years in this e-learning agency capacity, I started my own agency. It's called Sandbox Learning Experience Design. I have a spicy ad toward the end of your book. And from there, the sky was the limit. I started freelancing and working in consulting for Fortune 500 companies, like WPP Advertising was my client, also some NGOs. And I was able to also kind of, through some of my work, fulfill my passion for sustainability and people and planet. So as part of my pivot, I wrote a book. It's called Next Level Instructional Design. It's available on Amazon. I'm happy if anyone just Googles it now. No pressure to buy. That's not why I wrote it. I wrote it to help others. And so now I own two companies, Sandbox Learning Experience Design and EthoWork Consulting, which I am the learning architect for an environmental and better work social responsibility consulting firm. So that's my story. I'll pass it to Danica. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So my name is Danica Johnston, and I am the Director of Academic Programs at Shawshene Valley Technical School in Billerica, Massachusetts. When I graduated from high school, like many young adults, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But the next natural step was to go to college. I actually went to college to play sports. I played 3 NCAA sports while I was in college, so I was extremely busy. I decided to major in business because my father had majored in business, so I thought it was something I was interested in. And I got into the field of business and realized that something was missing. I was very unhappy. I was making plenty of money, but there was just that piece that I was missing. So I really enjoyed working with younger athletes. And when you're a college athlete, your summers are spent essentially working summer camps for younger athletes. I loved that interaction. So I decided to get into the education realm. I started as a paraprofessional, started coaching. I then became a math teacher. I went back to school and got my master's in mathematics. I became a department chair. Then I went back to school and got my master's in educational leadership, became an assistant principal. And now at my current role, it is my favorite role so far in education. And the reason being is vocational education is a lot different than people thought or have the impression that it is. Students are happy to come to school. Every student finds their place and every student finds success. My school is in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has extremely high standards for academic excellence. We are held to those same exact standards as comprehensive schools, except we have half of the time to get through all those standards. So the impression that people share sometimes around, oh, vocational education must be watered down and it's for students who are not very academic. It's actually the complete opposite. Our students have to get through their academics very quickly. During their junior year, they get to go out on co op. So they work at doctor's offices, engineering firms, marketing firms, salons, construction sites. Our students are some of the most skilled individuals I've had the pleasure of working with. And a lot of what I will speak to today is how we develop skills that are transferable across any industry. I will now pass it to Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Berryhill. I currently own my own college admissions company called Elite College Hacker. Website is the same name.com. My story is a bit wild, but I'll give the concise version. I started on I would say, the not so happy side of education. I was originally born in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, at an elementary school that, frankly, was the definition of the school to prison pipeline. That if you were an African American male and you wanted to get all A's, you would face literally every form of abuse you can imagine. Yes, I said every. And in that environment, so often I wondered, well, I just want to get good grades. Why am I getting beaten up? Why are the teachers supporting this kind of behavior? And I realized that I had to get the heck out of there. And for me, that was very much at a young age upskilling myself. The days when we had dial-up internet and things like that. It's reading and kind of trying to make sure I go above grade level. An outreach program called the Breakthrough Collaborative literally saved my life. They saw this happening, came to my school and said, "We're going to get you out of here." And then I went to a school called Israel Newman High School. It also saved my life because they were able to help me kind of make that transition to a college level life. And they also were like, "Hey, you're never going to get abused here. We will protect you." But what I noticed at that school and then eventually Stanford, where I got myself into, was that so often we spend a lot of our time in education telling people knowledge is power and all these kind of platitudes, but we don't tell them how to onboard themselves to those kind of experiences. We don't tell them what prior knowledge we assume. And I saw this myself at Stanford, taking a lot of those classes, that teachers would say things like, "We expect that all these students have gone to the Globe Theater. We expect that they know how to do a close reading. They know how to do the quadratic formula," with no discussion about what those expectations were. So throughout my college experience at Stanford as an undergrad and then at Yale as a PhD in political theory, focusing intersectionality practice, um, I often worked in various consulting capacities. One was as debate coach for those fast-talking national circuit debaters. I coached a lot of those kids, not just to make my make ends meet, but also I got to see firsthand where even the quote-unquote top students are missing these skills. That they don't know what's expected out of them to go to college or to be a good debater. Let's use the debate for a quick example. So often people were told, like I was when I was a debater, just be confident. That does nothing. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of our teaching stops, and that's also where inclusion stops. So across my whole academic career, I often worked as a consultant to the Stanford Writing Center, to the Yale, to a lot of the Yale departments, trying to teach, not just help the students, but also teach the teachers how to be more inclusive, how to fill in those gaps. The second part of that journey then moved over into leaving academia, where I worked at an expert network firm for about 8 years, 4 years starting from the very bottom, doing the cold calling, doing the recruiting, talking to C-level professionals, and then I was kind of I had a decision to make. Either, you know, the firm figured out, oh, you have teaching experience, you do a lot of this work, you need to start our learning and development function, or you're fired. So I started that function where I focus a lot on new hire onboarding and job training and creating that company's first diversity inclusion plan. And what I learned from that is that so often in education and in education adjacent spaces, we assume that people have one persona: white, male, cisgendered, very, 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 very wealthy and tall. Unfortunately, there's a body component of that too. And and a lot of the work I've done is to try to shatter that or hack those systems. Um, and that's continued throughout. So, I said I do college admissions work. One of the reasons I do that work is because so often our students are told lies that are great for marketing, including some larger companies, but they're not actually told how to write those essays. They're not told to convey your story to a very tired admissions officer who's just read 100 essays, has a baby crying, and a cat running on their laptop. So that's what I do. So that's my story, as I concluded, has been across these spaces. One, as a student who's often in the spaces of learning and development, et cetera, left out, and then trying to find ways to use skills development to crack those systems, which is a very radical practice, but it's one that I'm glad it's being recognized, and I think one that, frankly, we all need today, given all the chaos that's going on. Happy to elaborate more, but that's the short version.
Thank you, Anthony. So my story is I actually went from being a teacher, a very common story, to learning art, to growing a business and winning an award for the business, which is all part of why I want to talk about transitioning skills. So when I began my career right out of university, I decided to see if I wanted to teach. I wanted to focus at risk youth. I came from a rough childhood, and I thought my empathy and skills there may be useful for teaching. I was good in math and science, so I decided to focus on math. Now, you've heard me mention I'm an artist, essentially. So I'm a super creative mathematics person. And the point behind that was I was hoping combining that would help kids we all have seen situations that are not, try and be polite about this. We've all seen the situations. It's common discourse. We share our stories, and there is not stability for them to learn. There sometimes isn't food. They have jobs. They have siblings. They don't have stability. And so that's where my first career went. And I stayed in that for 9 years. My role was when I burn out, I leave because I don't appreciate teachers I saw in mathematics that stayed when they burnt out. They ended up screaming at the kids. They ended up, hurting the kids who are already dealing with difficulties. Why be there? So while I was a teacher, I learned a lot of skills. I learned how to talk to people. I learned crowd management. I learned how to take a concept that naturally may not work in someone's brain, look at how they think, dissect it, and teach it in a way that hopefully they can succeed, and then have them help each other, collaborative learning. These are all skills many of us have. But the funny thing is, when you transfer them, they can help you learn to do things that other people say you can't do. Now, the next part of my career was, I said, me being an artist. I make handmade crystal jewelry. It does not sound like something that could grow as a business. And on purpose, I decided to try to disprove what people were saying to me because I don't like people putting others in boxes before they know them. And a lot of my ethos and the reason I come on stages and share my story is to undo that, to show that that isn't the way to look at things, that every single person has amazing potential, again, educators, And who is someone to say they can't do it? Instead of saying, how can you get them there? So I became what I call a case study. I learned my art. Then I decided to say, hey, I think I can do business. So I learned business. I started on Etsy, again, artist. And then I decided to move to Amazon. And so I started selling my handmade crystal jewelry. The company is Designs by Nature Gems, if you want to look at it. And we grew big enough to win an award for fastest growing company in 2022 from the Stevie Awards Women in Business. I also have won an award for Female Entrepreneur of the Year in 2023. The reason I'm saying the awards is that's part of the case study. Because I have to return to saying I'm an artist, and I have to return to say transferable skills. So for me, I come up here kind of as an example of like the other side of saying, hey, here's education. We all have all these amazing skills. I use these skills to teach my team. If you're in business, you know you need a good team. I have an amazing team. They are phenomenal. We would not exist. Like, I'm so thankful for them, and they hear me all the time say it. And I make sure to treat them well, and I can go into my business ethics later. The point is, the skills I got from teaching is what enabled my business to flourish, to work with artists, and to get awards. And all the time, I think my favorite one was a friend of my partner said to me, you made that on a bracelet company? And he is in accounting and finance, and he's like a VP of, 7, 8 figure companies, and he was in shock. And that was why I did it. And that's why I share my story. So I'm going to be talking about those skills, about how we all have these amazing skills to teach, about, entrepreneurship a bit, just like recognizing them, sharing them. All of us are doing things in our own way to help make it better. And I'm coming from the other side, trying to share a story and teaching people, often outside of the school system, that, hey, you can do this too. It's just, here's this skill, here's that skill. All right, put it in your voice, off you go. It's, again, teaching. So. All right, that's my story. And I think we're on to the first question. So we met yesterday and we ended up just chatting, knowing each other, things like this, at a wonderful brunch. And we realized that one of the things that came out was a word resourcefulness. We kept talking about it on repeat. And so my question for all the wonderful panelists is, how would you say the career changes helped with your resourcefulness and the skills you gathered from the career changes? And how do you impart that with whoever your clients are or your students? Sorry.
I can go ahead and start, I
Thank you.
guess.
Sorry. I'm used to people just taking it. I apologize. I'll be a little more specific.
No worries. Every day tests my resourcefulness as an entrepreneur. When you are an employee, your manager tells you what to do, right? You may have some ideas on your own, your department director, whomever, but generally speaking, someone is giving you guidance. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you are charged with your own self-guidance 100% of the time. Now, true, I have clients, and true, my clients ask me to develop learning in specific areas and topics. Review my learning, give me feedback. I make edits, I offer suggestions. There is guidance that way. But I can tell you everything I've done that I never knew how to do before. I am a website designer now. I'm a graphic designer now. I'm a social media strategist now, which I am not good at that. So if you know anyone who is, I would love to get their name. I marketing, sales, networking, all of those things I really never did a lot of before. So entrepreneurship for me personally tests new skills every single day, and your resourcefulness. I think that's like a really practical explanation of resourcefulness, because you have to figure it out for yourself.
Thank you. So since I'm still in a school system, schools are always strapped for funding. It is what it is. So any educator in this room knows that you have to be resourceful. Throughout my leadership journey, I've learned to rely on grants and people that I know to get resources for kids. I believe in equity and opportunity for everyone. So leveling the playing field has been my entire sort of mission since coming into education, whether it's lobbying at the state level to the governor to allow my non English speaking students or my non citizen students to be able to participate in all of the activities that their peers can, explaining to people our programming around once kids reach their junior year, they get to go out and work. This makes such a difference in kids' lives to be able to earn money, maybe make a difference for their family, and start to build upon what they want to do. They can maybe even go purchase a car with the money that they have earned. We teach students to be resourceful with whatever they can in their environment. So during their freshman year, students get to go through 14 different programs for a week each. We make sure they learn a concrete skill that they can bring through the rest of their life. You go through our automotive program, you can change a tire, every single one of them. You go through our culinary program, you can bake, you can cook. We really just look for as many opportunities as we can to find the resources to help people get where they want to be. And I think personally, being able to, each position that I was in, I took advantage of the opportunities to grow my professional development or to get my master's degree. And even now, I am always constantly trying to get more for my students, whether it's bringing in concurrent enrollment and college admissions, partnering with community colleges or other colleges, partnering with the unions. About 50% of our students go to college and about 50% go directly into industry. So teaching them the importance of resourcefulness is definitely very important.
Completely concur. For me, I think about resourcefulness, I think about the word resources. And maybe this is because I'm a political theorist by training, but that's one of the most important ones when we talk about equality, right? Is do people have not just monetary things, but do they have the information? Do they have the context to fulfill the standards we expect out of them? This is spanned across my whole, academic career. Like most recently, I was a vice president of learning at PIMCO. Notice I said learning and not IT. um, I had to deal with hardware access issues, which were tied to cloud infrastructure. And everyone around me was saying, you need to do project management, and no one could define what the heck that was. So I had to go figure out what is a methodology I could use, Agile, in order to figure out something that I have no business even touching. And then eventually, that experience and all the trauma that led to push me to get a PMP last week. So it's something I've had to do myself. And one of my goals in terms of hacking all these systems is that other people have an easier path, that we're very clear about what those resources are and that we bring those resources to them. This shows up a little bit in my college, not a little bit, all the time in my college admissions practice, where I work with a lot of students, particularly Asian American students, and there's this narrative that there's a lot of racism in the system. There's some, but it's not the way people think. I think a lot of the issue is that these students are often misled, often by their parents, often by the people in their high schools, and most certainly by their peers. So what I have to teach these students that it's not good enough to do 8 billion clubs, actually tell them not to do that. It's not good enough to take 6 APs, which you shouldn't do, and then you shouldn't be trying to be a checklist, I'm leading nine different things, but rather to teach them the process of getting resources and doing things of your own merit and your own efforts. Stanford calls this intellectual vitality, which is actually one of the three main criteria. It's actually the one that eliminates a lot of these students, and I agree with them. It eliminates these students because what Stanford's looking for, they're looking, if you've ever been a Stanford student, right? People go to events like these and they have lunch and they have rip-roaring conversations about the Odyssey or some code they wrote, and there's no grades attached, right? A lot of these schools, actually, now all the schools are doing this at the top level. They're looking for students who can find their own resources. No, I didn't say parents. I said their own resources, do the hustles, do the cold calls, teach themselves things, and be the hyper nerds that we need them to be. In other words, resourcefulness. So this is something that I teach my students every day. I'll end this with one example. One of my students, she got a half merit scholarship to Harvard, which never happens. And during COVID, her first response was, I don't know what to do. And I said, okay, first off, what are the benefits here? And she said to me was, you know, now that I think about it, I'm so happy I don't have to deal with those sexist boys in my STEM classes.
Hmm.
And I said, well, we have an essay. Then there was another issue because, her grandmom, was very, very sick. And in California, I'm not going to name the particular place, there was a move to force all the students into in school training before we had a vaccine. So she asked me, what do I do? And I said, you're into political activism, aren't you? Why don't don't you have a lot of friends who agree with you that you've been telling me about? Why don't you raise hell at the city council? And she did, and was able to delay that move for 1 year when the vaccine came. Again, she got into Harvard and every UC school, and she's an Asian American student. But we don't tell those students to do those things, and sometimes I have to fight the parents, and I'm willing to do it. And then they thank me when they get into Berkeley. So when I talk about resourcefulness, right, it's not the resources that our schools tell people. It's often, and I guess I'll say this more later. Sometimes you get an allergic reaction if you do this right, because so often in our various corporate environments, et cetera, we have this notion of who should belong. I mean, per your comment, right? We have this notion of who should belong, and sometimes education is the gatekeeper. Um,
Yes.
and that's what I've spent my whole career trying to fight.
Thank you. I might, sorry, my brain. I have ADHD. My brain jumps. Sorry. There we go. I'm back. Anyways, I'm going to add actually on to what Anthony said through some experience. So in my company, again, education background, so law teaching, being part of the core, I trained my managers, I trained my execs, and everyone tells me to what degree they want to do it. There's a lot of listening because it's collaborative. So we have to talk about what we have, and we make sure not to push boundaries in that way, and that's a big part of it. But another thing that happened is I used to take on often interns, and now I do this more like with mentoring or volunteering. And when I did that, what I saw was the effects of an education system. And it got hard because when you got into like, I'm an art company, like I am very, into open ideas and this and that, but I have to have structure and standards. And sometimes what happened was the language going into limits, the language wasn't being asked. They followed that tick box. That was one example. I was thinking of with one or two people when you were saying that. They would follow these tick boxes because that was their security, but they were failing at the job. And I couldn't communicate. And believe me, I tried. Um, but it wouldn't work. And so they would go to another manager, and then there would be another problem. Because what happened is they hadn't learned the resourcefulness we're talking about. They hadn't learned how to ask the questions, how to take feedback, how to apply. I literally would say sometimes for one or two people saying, they don't know the words they're saying, and they're saying heavy words, things that could really upset people. And I would say, legally, you're saying this, here's the definition, this is what it is, careful with choosing your words. Because that is serious, and they didn't even understand it. Because in their mind, they were trained for tick boxes. In their mind, they are achieving if they're hitting these little tasks. And I'm a small company. We are fast growing. We have a lot of initiatives happening at any time. We teach you prioritization. We teach you communication. We teach you agility. We don't mind teaching. We do mind when people can't learn how to listen, and there's only much time we can give. And that's why resourcefulness is huge. I could talk about it in my own career, but I think you've heard it already through my story. But when I see other people who are very young, usually early 20s, and they struggle, and something I haven't even fully figured out how to do is to communicate to them this method you're doing, this way, it's gonna bite you unless you go into high corporate at a low level. Because you're right, in a big corporation, again, I haven't worked this is from what I've heard, so I could be wrong, but from even what I'm talking to people over there in the business side, like the more traditional business corporate, big, medium, they have to have it super structured because there's so many people. And that's kind of when the tick box may work. But I'm not even sure here. I don't know. That's just the only time I can see it working from having no knowledge. So we return to resourcefulness. One of the things of teaching the questions, of raising hell, of just doing one or two things. Come to, small companies, I hope a lot of us, come to us, ask a question, bring an initiative, and then come with proof. All we want to know is proof of concept. If you have an open-minded workplace, really, you just want proof of concept. So before you start putting money and operations and the team's hours into something, you proved it. And that's my company. That's a small business where I know other small businesses. So I don't know. It's a really interesting conversation. So another thing we asked, and Danica, I think I'll start with you this time, is the importance of an open mindset, which I think works really well with what we discussed.
Okay, so again, when I first got into vocational education, I had a very similar impression that everyone else did, that maybe this was just an alternative way to educate students who didn't want to be in a school system. That is the exact opposite way that I feel now. I I have two daughters. They are 9 and 11. They are very high achieving already, and I would be happy for them to go to a vocational high school in Massachusetts. Our students in our engineering programs go on to train kids who have just come out of their undergraduate degree because they know CAD. They know all these different programs and they know how to interact with each other because every other week they spend 6.5 hours a day in a shop doing project-based learning. It teaches them to think, it teaches them to collaborate, and it definitely teaches them to have an open mind. They have to work with people all the time that they might not be best friends with. They also are always challenged to take something from concept to production. And the way that students have to think about these things is very incredible. The other thing for me personally, and in my experience, is keeping an open mind around outcomes for students. In Massachusetts, there's a huge push for people, everyone to go to college. You need to go to college. We're also facing a huge shortage in the trades. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough plumbers. So sending the message that college is the only way is a really skewed view. Our students who go out and become journeyman plumbers or journeyman electricians start their own companies at age 22. By the age of 24, they're making an average of $125 an hour. Now, I have an undergraduate degree and I did not make $125 an hour, maybe even now. And so making sure that you can also keep an open mind yourself, but sell that to other people, sell that to students. And personally, it has helped me grow so much to just be able to think of things differently and also hear what people are saying and truthfully listen and not just get ready to respond to what people are saying to me.
Um, Yeah, this is a principle I care a lot about because so often, as someone who comes from a lot of the environments of the people I help, so often open-mindedness is not something we can assume, right? So as a debater, it was very much I'm in Louisiana, in places where the last names are X and T, and I'm the only African American there, right? How do I appeal to someone in that experience? What language do I use? Or even in terms of kind of these Ivy League institutions I've been a part of, open-mindedness is something I didn't have a benefit of when I was a PhD and having all these conversations. So the way I kind of leverage that is it's twofold. One, when you're talking about senior leadership or people who are stakeholders, one thing I would suggest all of us make sure we do is make sure that we're on the same page. And to test the open-mindedness of the people we're working with, because no learning and development thing will survive a leadership that doesn't care about inclusion or that has a double talk. Sometimes I've created programs that will solve a problem, i.e., we will train your Gen Z students how to do development, or we would train them how to talk on the phone, and then the conversation really is, oh no 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 no, we want everyone to be trained, and then we get to handpick the 1% who get promoted. That's You can't fool this generation that way, but that happens all of the time. So that's one thing I would suggest for all of us, not just in terms of the effectiveness, for our own self-care, is making sure we're aligned with the people to and really make sure those leaders are in line. The second part is in terms of students, and this is where I'll talk about admissions again. Um, when I work with a student and their parents, one of the things I always ask is, why do you want to go to Harvard or Stanford? What is the purpose? And I would say the thing that scares the living what out of me is when I hear I just want to apply to all the Ivies because they have great U.S. News and World Report rankings. So either two things happen. I cross-examine them for 3 hours and we get to a real purpose because they can't write that on their essays and get in. That doesn't cut it. Or we the relationship ends, right? Because it's if we're not open-minded about why we want to do things, and if we're not coachable and we're not willing to adjust around reality and the way things actually are, then no one can save you. um, and I think that's a challenge. And I was really relate to what you're saying, right? Like if someone said to me, and I actually had this conversation 2 weeks ago, I really want to make a lot of money. Sometimes the answer is not law school. Right? Sometimes the answer is not medical school. Sometimes the answer is vocational training. Sometimes the answer is go start your own business and then treat your school, just get the diploma as easy as you can. So part of that challenge of open-mindedness is there's a little bit of ego death, right?
Mhm.
It's I think the world works a certain way, but when we're hired, we're working in reality. And so often in education, be it corporate, academic, and otherwise, that distinction those are two different worlds, but we don't acknowledge how they're different.
I'd like to pick up on your concept of death of the ego and open-mindedness. Yeah. So, for me personally, I had a graduate degree. I, did very well in that program. And then, I went into teaching and I taught for 20 years at a design and merchandising oriented school, somewhat vocational in nature. And I was always nominated best instructor every year. And won the award. And there was always this kind of validation that I'm good at what I do. But when I started my own business, there was no one there to give me that validation except my clients. And clients don't typically go, this is fabulous. They typically go, change this, that, 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 that. Okay, it's approved, right? And so that became really hard for me. So I challenged myself to have more of, not to use the cliche term, a growth mindset. And I started just doing a deep dive into education. I told you about my second master's degree, right? I earned that. I went and I got a certificate in design thinking at IDEO. And then I became a pro bono coach at IDEO for their online courses for 4 years until I couldn't afford to do that pro bono anymore. And then I got a certificate in from Cornell in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now I'm taking courses in sustainability at Harvard Extension School. I've never stopped learning. So I've kept my mind open as long as I can because if I'm in learning and development, it makes no sense for me not to be learning and developing myself.
More than fair. Um, so for me, I'm going to come at this because I could come at this from a few different perspectives. I'm going to come at this going back to who I employ because I think that may be the most useful for this discussion. I employ people who are artists, obviously, but artists come in a variety of ways, just like an educator comes in a variety of personalities and methods and skills. So when I employ someone who's an artist, they have to fit the team. So I have to see how open-minded they are to adapting. And I employ other types of people. I'm going to keep it at artists, though, just to make this easier as an example. So I have to see how they adapt. I have to teach them the communications, teach them the structure. Actually, one of my managers, a production manager, does this now, and the COO oversees. So that's kind of how we've switched it off over the years. At the beginning, obviously, I was the person doing it. And what I knew was transferable skills was huge. If I went and hired someone who, on average, is an established artist on their own, their vision is beautiful, but if they do not understand that their vision and their business, which I in the contracts put, please continue on your own time. Like I want almost every single employee of mine has their own business. Like I want people to do what they want to do. But if they cannot maintain that open mind, that I'm willing to say, hey, you do what you do, you can learn some skills, I'm sure you apply yourself. I'm completely cool with that. That's learning, that's life. But when you come through the door, you have to listen to how we need to do things. Because in the end, I have to sell a product. I have to sell a product. If I do not sell a product, we do not exist. Your job doesn't exist. The company doesn't exist. And that sometimes becomes the hardest thing for me to teach people. And as a result, of course, we have quality control and feedback, and we give people like a journeyman structure, and we have all that. But that one part right there is actually sometimes where I run into a wall. And it's fascinating for me. And it's not that I don't want these people to succeed. I really do give people time to adjust. I usually maintain 6 months. And by 6 months, people show themselves. Your personality will show. Your work ethic will show. Your digestibility and your willingness to learn. You don't have to be perfect. Just work with us. So open-mindedness becomes huge because that's an artist. Now I've hired a lot of people who are more craftspeople. Transferable skills. The last person, she's actually a friend of mine. She started at the beginning. She was trained as a mechanic, did that for years, and then she's just an artist by nature. She looked at my pieces and figured out how to do them as a client, and she sent me a picture, and I started laughing. I said, "Do you want to work for me? I need help." And she is phenomenal, and she's one of my most amazing people on the team. And the story there is, again, open-mindedness. I could have been threatened. I could have been insulted. I could have been like, "Oh wow, someone actually figured out my designs. This is uncomfortable. I'm really scared." She did. She completely reverse engineered me, and she's phenomenal. I love how she thinks because of it. But instead, she's like, "I'm going to send this to this person who I respect, see if they're okay with it." And I say, "Wow, all right." And 2 months later, "Hey, I need help. Please join me." And she's like, the company's young. It's only existed like 5 years in the form it is. And she's been with us for all that time. That's an open mind. It comes from my side. It has to. But it also has to come from hers. Because if she didn't have that open mind to learn, to grow, to adjust as we're a business, we've pivoted, we're small, we're pivoting all the time, she wouldn't have been able to stay. I wouldn't have this amazing employee who I am very grateful for, let alone, the other team members who I really appreciate. And all that comes down from transferable skills and an open mind. So that's my part of the addition. Anyways, the next question. And this time, Anthony, I'm going to start with you. Oh, how much time do we have? I did lose time.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. So I'm just going to. All right. We'll end on this question. And if anyone has questions, please come up to us. We would love to chat. We really would. Is accountability and ownership? Let's just start there.
Yeah, this is my pain point, and not just students, but parents too. I'm a big fan of once we set a goal or a scope, we have to stick to it. Maybe this is the project PMP in me. And what often happens is people will come to me, they'll see that I'm very caretaking and such. And then in the 5% of cases where an admission cycle does not work, it's almost either one, the student doesn't take accountability, they're too busy. That's don't, that, when I hear that, I'm like, you're not Stanford material. Be careful what you wish for. And more often the parents, right? They'll try to take too much ownership. They'll try to run the process. I'll end with this one example. Well, not one example. Set of cases where I will work with a student and I will really work them hard, and then one time I'll see a draft of the essay near the deadline. I'm like, this is garbage. I'm like, you are not getting into any top 100 school with this essay. What? This is not even you. And I will say, your parents saw this, didn't they? Or someone in your family. And they would say, how do you know? And I'm like, well, admissions officers or people who read 100, 200 essays a year, we get this little twisting stomach like you're about to vomit when we feel like someone's being inauthentic. So when a family friend wants to put their sense in, you start seeing phrases like words like passion, sorry, Forrest Gump references. I'm not kidding. And then you're just like, who is this human being? Like, I don't want them here. I don't know what are we doing. So I think that's why I like those words, because it's like holding ourselves to know what we want to do, but sticking to it and not trying to fill it in with our own agendas. And I think that's where accountability and ownership both come into play. If we don't own ourselves and we don't hold ourselves accountable to our own authenticity and our own truth, everyone can figure it out, especially in 2024.
Mm.
Accountability as a solopreneur brings a new level to the word accountability, truly. So, I have to really make sure I complete everything on my checklist. And I literally and I'm old school. I write everything out. I don't have, I mean, I have Monday.com for my clients and my projects, but for me, I have to be my own manager, my own director, my own VP. Otherwise, I don't make any money and I do not keep my clients happy. So accountability is very much tied in my world to scheduling myself and how I work. I am not the best at it. My husband can tell you. It is a challenge for me. Fortunately, he's a fabulous cook. I have a hard time with it, but it's something that I know I have to do for the success of my own enterprises. So that's what keeps me accountable to myself is really in the end, I need to get paid, right? Um, but yeah, that's about as pragmatic of an answer as I think anyone gave today. Right?
So being an excuse me, being an educational leader, you are accountable always. You are accountable to your students, your school. I think that accountability can take on one of two sort of lenses. You can be accountable and focus so heavily on test scores and student outcomes, or you can be accountable and focus on the child and educating that individual in the best way possible. Um, it has helped keeping myself accountable has helped me be so successful and transform two school districts. I walked into the current school that I am in, and we immediately were put into corrective action by the state of Massachusetts because we did not have a program for English language learners. The yes, the school's almost 60 years old. They have the same schedule that they started with 60 years ago, offer incredible programming, but it was not accessible to all students. So I really feel that being a leader, I have to be accountable to every single child. So I created this very robust program. It's now the model for the state of Massachusetts for every L program. I also introduced co-teaching for the first time. We have 7 levels of English every year, and such a non-traditional way to think about education, our kids were really missing out with having that support adult in the classroom. And I feel like teaching our students accountability is really accountability to themselves, their own values, and to their peers in their community. The mission of vocational school is to inform and prepare for the workforce in your community. So we are constantly going back and forth with our co-op employers and talking about what skills students need to be most successful, and accountability often comes up as number one.
More than true. So I'm going to close this with just explaining accountability within the professional sphere and myself, but in about 1 or 2 sentences. So accountability in the professional sphere is what keeps things going. Accountability for my team is what helps them to trust each other. I think with that, we can close and make sure the next panelists have their time. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Thank you.
Okay, we're done.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights.